Hi everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the New Zealand investment visa category and specifically the new settings under what's called the Active Investor Plus. Now I'm going to make a couple of videos. This video is going to be about the growth category and the second one will be called the balanced category. Now what is growth and balanced? These are terms relating to the two separate pathways for residents under the Active Investor Plus. So I'll explain a little bit of that in more detail. But first of all, what is the investor category in New Zealand? Just a quick summary. I've made a video on this before and we can watch it on YouTube if you like, but the investor category, generally speaking, is a pathway to residence in New Zealand and therefore later permanent residence and or citizenship by way of investment. It's not buying citizenship, it's not buying a passport. What it is that you are investing in acceptable and approved investments in New Zealand for a period of time, and by way of that investment, you then are eligible for a resident visa. Now, today I'm not going to be talking about citizenship. This is way down the track. Citizenship in New Zealand does require being a resident for 5 years and staying in the country. This is not about citizenship by investment. Many countries around the world have a citizenship by investment or let's say buying a passport program. They call this a golden visa, right? New Zealand's investment category is about investing and being granted a resident visa, different from citizenship. Okay, so first of all, what are the different categories that you can apply for under this Active Investor Plus? There are two main ways. One is called growth and the other is called balanced. In this video, we're talking about the growth category. So what is that? This is for investors who are planning to make a significant contribution in New Zealand to the value of at least 5 million New Zealand dollars, which on current exchange rates is about 3 million US dollars. So 5 million New Zealand dollars to be invested in acceptable investments. What an acceptable investment is something which is approved by the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise Organization, NZTE. Now this is distinct from the other category called the balanced category, which we'll talk about in the next video, but the approved investments under NZTE are specifically for this growth category of $5 million. New Zealand Trade and Enterprise is essentially, it's an organization that has been granted the authority by the New Zealand government to approve investments, and they are approving two different types of investments. There are direct investments, and then there are managed funds. Okay, so first of all, what is a direct investment? It is what it sounds like. It's an investment direct into a company, a business, or a venture. Okay, so NZTE has what they call live deals. There are deals which have been approved by NZTE and are published, and it would be something like a company that is seeking funds, seeking investment capital, venture capital for a specific project or for their venture. Maybe it's a tech startup, some kind of a new technology or something that they want to promote, and they are raising capital for it. That is a direct investment. You will invest directly into that company, which is approved by NZTE. On the other hand, we have managed funds. And managed funds it's otherwise known in some other countries as mutual funds or maybe managed venture capital. In a sense, it's kind of like where you have a company or an investment company as an intermediary who is going to pool funds together and manage them on an investment project. And usually these managed fund companies will set up something for a specific purpose or a particular type of venture. They might say, okay, here's a fund that we are pooling $100 million, and that $100 million will then be invested in a range of ventures that are approved and acceptable. Okay. Now, the big question we get about the investment side is, where should I invest? What's the risk profile? What is the liquidity? Now, these are things that we can't really answer as immigration lawyers because this comes down to financial advice. We need to defer to the professionals, the financial companies, but generally speaking, you can expect that investing in a direct investment to a company or investing in a managed fund under NZTE is going to be a little bit more risky than government bonds or banking term investments or things that are secured, like maybe just traditional equities and securities on the stock exchange. So that's something that you'll need to consider if you're looking at this growth category. So we've covered the minimum investment. It's 5 million New Zealand dollars. The other criteria for this particular category are the same criteria as the other balance category, and that is that you need to be a fit and proper person. You have to meet health and character requirements, and you have to be able to prove where your money came from, right? So proving where your money came from is essentially showing that it is lawful funds, that it's earned by you. If it has been gifted to you by way of a will, or your parents or somebody has passed away and you've received the money through a will, this is something that's quite common. We need to show this. We need to prove that the funds are lawfully earned, lawfully obtained. We do this through your tax returns, through property sale agreements, etc., etc. The transfer of funds into New Zealand is the other key part of the process. Once you've been approved in principle for your visa, you have a period of 6 months to then move your money into New Zealand through the banking system and invest it in the approved investment. Now, what is unique to the growth category, which is distinct from the balance category, is the amount of time you then have to have your funds invested in New Zealand and the amount of time you will have to stay in New Zealand. Okay, so under the growth category, the 5 million New Zealand dollars needs to be invested for a period of at least 3 years. And during that 3 years, you need to stay in New Zealand for only 21 days. Okay, so a week per year for 3 years is enough to then satisfy your 3-year investment period. And what happens at the end of that 3 years is whether you leave the investment or take it out is not the issue. As long as it has been invested right up into that 3 years, you can then apply for the removal of any conditions on your visa and what's called a permanent resident visa. Now, the difference between residence and permanent residence in New Zealand, it's a little bit different than some other countries where they only have one terminology of permanent residence, but we have residence with travel conditions and then permanent residence. Okay, so the difference is that when you have travel conditions on your resident visa, you're allowed to travel in and out of the country as much as you like during that travel condition period, which in this case is 3 years. Then at the end of the 3 years, if you can satisfy the requirements of your investment and having stayed 21 days, those travel conditions are removed and you can apply for permanent residence. At the end of the 3 years, if you don't satisfy the conditions of your visa, which is 21 days stay and the investment period, if you don't satisfy those conditions, then your travel conditions can expire, and therefore your resident visa would expire if you were outside New Zealand or if you were inside New Zealand and then left New Zealand. So there are options for you at that time. We can do variations of travel conditions, et cetera, et cetera. But generally speaking, during that 3 years, you want to satisfy the conditions and then move on to permanent residence. That's how that works. Now, the question would be next, okay, well, how do I go about this? What do I do? If I want to, I've got my 5 million New Zealand dollars, I want to try this. Now, obviously, our advice is to get advice. We're always advised to talk to a professional, talk to someone who knows what they're doing, who can help you through the process. If you're going to be investing 5 million New Zealand dollars, maybe it's okay to spend a little bit of money on a good lawyer or investor, accountant who can help you. But the process, generally speaking, is like this. We prepare your application, reviewing all of your documents, reviewing all of your background, confirm your eligibility, make sure that we're not wasting your time, that everything can proceed. Then, of course, the substantive application is lodged into immigration. Once it is lodged, it then has to be allocated to a visa officer. Currently, we are seeing, under this new category, allocations to visa officers are happening very quick. In some cases, it's been a matter of days, not weeks. So once it's then assessed by a visa officer, they'll come back and ask questions. Maybe they need clarification on documentation. You have to complete your medical examinations, character references, etc., etc. Then you receive that approval in principle. All of this can happen within a matter of months. The investor category, as it has been reshaped, is somewhat of a priority for New Zealand because, well, maybe not a priority, but because it's so new, these new settings, the team in Immigration New Zealand who are tasked with processing these applications are fresh, and then they're onto it. And so we are seeing applications come through reasonably quickly. It's not a matter of taking years and years. You get that approval in principle, then you have to then move your money into New Zealand. You have a 6-month period, and as long as you do that within 6 months, you then get, granted your residence. What can you do with your residence? Well, you can live in New Zealand if you like. You don't have to, you can just visit here. But if you live in New Zealand, you'll be allowed to work. If you want to work, you'll be allowed to invest. You can buy property, you can buy a house to live in, to invest in. If you have children of school age, they can go to school for free because they're a resident. If you have dependent children who have already completed high school, but they're still dependent on you, they can actually be included on your residence application up to a certain age. The age is 24. And if they are of university age, then because they're a resident, they will be eligible for government level tuition in New Zealand, which is highly subsidized. Essentially, as a resident of New Zealand, you have a very similar rights and obligations as a citizen does. You just don't hold the passport. So that's the growth category. I'm going to make another video that talks about the balanced category, which essentially is the same application, but it's different in terms of how much you invest, how long you invest, and how long you need to stay in New Zealand. Stay tuned for that. And if you want to contact us for advice or you need help with anything related to any visa, check out the contact details here in the video description, and good luck.